Today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search builds great teams by connecting lawyers in Texas with career opportunities at small and boutique law firms. So if you're thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel Hare back with you on Lone Star Lawyers. I hope you and your family are both healthy and safe. Before we get into this episode, I want to let you know about all the opportunities that we are currently searching for. And I actually posted these in a LinkedIn post last week, which you can go and check out if you don't catch them all right here. But real quick, we're looking for a construction law attorney in Dallas, a family law attorney in Tarrant County, an insurance coverage attorney in San Antonio, but you could actually remote from anywhere. So don't let San Antonio be the only people that apply. Education law attorney in Austin, but you could also be in Dallas or Houston. Business commercial litigation attorney in Houston, a plaintiff's firm briefing attorney in Houston, and a business and insurance defense litigation attorney in Dallas. So lots of opportunities all around the state. I hope that you or someone you know, if you are interested, will reach out to me. All right, today we are in Dallas, where our guest is Joey Sampson. Joey is a partner at McCathern, where he handles all areas of civil and business litigation, including insurance coverage issues, D&O liability claims, E&O claims, and much, much more. Joey was named a Texas Super Lawyers Rising Star in 2017 and 18, and also a D Magazine Best Lawyers in Dallas in 2018. All right, with that, let's hop into our conversation with Joey Sampson on today's Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Joey Sampson joins us right now. Joey, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today.
No problem, Daniel. Glad to be here.
Well, the folks at home listening just heard a very brief introduction I gave a second ago before we hopped on. But I would like to have you share with us a little bit more in depth about your firm and your specific practice as well. So tell us a little bit about what you've got going on at McCathern.
Yeah, I'm at McCathern PLLC. I'm in our Dallas office. We've got 4 offices: Dallas, Frisco, Texas, Los Angeles, and Houston. I'm coming up on 14 years with the firm. I started here January 2nd of 2007. So I've been here quite a while and have seen us grow from a 9 to 10 lawyer firm, I believe, when I started January 2nd, 2007 to now. I think in the range of 40 to 50 in the 4 offices. We went from the 1 office here in Dallas that I'm still at to having 4 offices. We do kind of a broad spectrum of civil litigation. We've expanded. We have a family law section. When I first started, we did a lot of insurance defense, but now it's kind of morphed into just a wide variety of civil litigation. My practice, I've done a full spectrum of civil litigation over my career. Lately, I've focused a lot more on insurance coverage litigation and also a lot of construction defect litigation, but I still handle a wide variety of cases.
Yeah, well, fantastic. And I know that some probably listening are familiar, but for those who aren't, your firm also has, I think, a recognizable and an interesting particular client and also the location of your office. Why don't you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, the Frisco, Texas office is at the Star, of course, the Dallas Cowboys headquarters. So we wanted an office there so we could, be available to our client, which is the Cowboys. We do a lot of their litigation work, whether it be the AT&T Stadium, or just the Cowboys in general. So there's, I've had a wide variety of cases just within the Cowboys organization that I've dealt with over the years too.
Yeah, that's cool. Before we go any further, I also want to ask you about how COVID-19 has been impacting you and your practice, as well as your clients, and maybe the needs that they've had over these last few months. Maybe and for context, people listening later, because this stuff changes so much and so quickly, I want to give context to that. We're recording this on November 19th. And so whenever you're listening to this, things may have changed between now and when you're listening. So, but as of November 19th, anyway, what is the latest with you all in terms of how COVID-19 is impacting you?
With us, we're still in office here in Dallas, at least. With our clients, it seems to me now at this point, this many months into it, I think people have kind of settled into the new norm, if you want to put it that way. I think we've seen ebbs and flows of the litigation over the past few months. I think initially when you had a lot of the shutdowns, things slowed down. I know in July, for me personally, July and August, things really picked back up, and probably a couple of the busiest months I've had, especially in the construction defect litigation area in a while, probably in the last 2 or 3 years. So I've seen those ebbs and flows just on the litigation side. For clients, there's always the new questions, because it is the new norm, but there's still unknowns. What should we do for dealing with employees that don't want to come back? What should we do for this, this and that? Through the Cowboys, one of my partners and I have got involved over the years with IAVM, the International Association of Venue Managers, and every other Friday we're attending conference calls. And these are, they represent public assembly venues around the globe. And some of the Cowboys folks are part of that too. But obviously this is everything from, your small performing arts center in a local community to AT&T Stadium. And so they have these meetings about, reopening and what do we do? And obviously they're one of the last, to open. We've seen like AT&T Stadium and the Cowboys games have some fans, but there's still, things that can't open yet. And so it's interesting being part of those groups. And we've done several presentations to those groups about legal aspects, but, that's where I'm seeing kind of the most, lag time and being able to reopen, and a lot of new questions. I think that's the big thing is what new questions are created by all of this. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And I don't think I've read or am familiar with any specific case yet. I'm sure there probably are, but since you're connected to that venue group, I'm wondering across all those spectrum of types of venues that we have, slowly either reopening or kind of partially reopening. Have there been cases of litigation resulting from people that have either contracted COVID or had a death or something from COVID that have then gone after a venue of some kind in terms of and I'm thinking about it from a sports law standpoint, which I teach. We talk about assumption of risk in the traditional sense of going to a game and getting hit with a foul ball and all that stuff, sort of the traditional model. Just wondering now kind of what across venues across the country, have we seen yet anything like that, or do we expect to see it over the coming months or years?
I would expect to see it. That was just an interview. Somebody sent me a link yesterday. I think Jerry Jones just had an interview on the local radio station about wanting to increase the numbers. And there was an article up here in the local news about, they did some contact tracing, and that over the course of 4 games, they came up with 8 people that said they had attended games that had COVID. To me, you have 25,000 plus each game, and you have 8 people reporting that they had gone to a game and they had it. That's a very small number, and I don't know why it was news. It was just interesting that they even wrote that article. But I haven't seen any cases against the venue. I think where they're taking most of the examples are some of these cases that have been brought against Walmart by their employees or against the cruise lines. And those cruise line cases were thrown out. And my understanding is thrown out on summary judgment because of there is some assumption of risk, number one. And I think it's very hard on the stadium side, just like I mentioned, those 8 cases, it's very hard to say, the contact tracing, how are they going to tell that you got it, versus a Kroger versus the stadium? So
while you were there,
exactly.
That causation piece and where did you actually get it is almost impossible, it would seem. So, well, that's interesting, but definitely interesting to watch as things
and
develop.
it's definitely something that they're concerned about, and that's some of the stuff that we're instructing them on, and just being part of a group like that where they have these biweekly meetings. It's important because then they're staying ahead of the curve, and they're saying like we did everything we could to be a reasonable venue manager, be a reasonable Walmart or Kroger. We did every precaution and took every precaution we could to avoid liability, or to just to help our patrons, and that's what they're doing. So, yeah.
You had also mentioned earlier about sort of getting into the new normal of operating during this kind of COVID time. With regards to hearings and depositions, those types of things that I presume you've done some of those by now by Zoom or by other type of web conference. What are some takeaways that you have from that experience and things that you've learned about moving forward, how to kind of be effective or you're most effective through those types of technologies while doing some of those hearings, depositions, that type of thing?
I think the big thing is adaptability. It is a new norm, so you gotta be able to adapt to these new circumstances and willing to learn. I had never even heard of Zoom before. I had, of course, attended, mostly telephonic depositions over the years. I don't think I'd had any video deposition before. And I did, honestly, I'd never even heard of Zoom. Now it's the new norm. I've done, uncountable. I don't know how many I've done now, but the Zoom depositions are happening. There was, I've done a little Microsoft Teams, but I think the takeaway that you just asked about was, I think it actually encourages your preparation, because what I've seen in the deposition world as far as Zoom goes is, you need to have all your documents ready to go, to do the share screen and to be able to bring them up. So you need to have them all organized and ready to go. Whereas sometimes in depositions before, I'd have those, but I wouldn't have them kind of in the order I wanted to go through. And that there's some adaptability to that they don't always work out. But I think in this instance, you gotta, with Zoom depositions, you've got to have those ready to go. And already brought up, where you can easily maneuver Zoom and use those, which is, it's something that's a little different than before. But I think it's, I don't know. I think it's here to stay. I would think, I guess Texas has to, extend these rules that they've put in place. I know I have a couple of federal cases, and I think it's in the federal rules, it's much easier just to have an agreement to do things like Zoom depositions. Whereas Texas, I think will have to alter the rules a little bit, to extend what they've been doing or allowing.
Yeah. Well, and as far as the way that we see things progressing in a post-COVID world, once it's completely behind us, do you see hearings by Zoom, maybe even depositions by Zoom, and some of this other stuff sticking with us and just becoming part of the way that we do things, or do you think we'll revert back to kind of how we were operating before? How do you see that kind of shaking out once we're in a post-COVID environment?
I think it'll be both. I think you'll have certain hearings that are document heavy, or depositions that are document intensive that you want to be in person for. And then others, I think if Texas extends these rules, it's going to cut down on having to drive to Houston for a deposition that's going to take 2 hours, and I have more drive time than getting down there, than actually doing the deposition. But I think you'll have a mixture of both. There's times in depositions where you want to be face to face with that person and confront them with a document or whatever. But, I can see for especially, quite a few depositions that this, extends out past COVID, where, it just makes it easier, and it's less of a cost for, ultimately for clients. And if you can save them on cost, then I think it helps everybody. That's one thing I've seen that's become a big burden on folks is the cost of litigation. Even a deposition transcript. It's I look at those bills sometimes, and I'm just thinking, how can anybody deal with a small little lawsuit, because a small lawsuit isn't a small lawsuit anymore, at least in my estimation. Right.
No. Well, and I'm glad to that, and I think it's important to emphasize that because I do feel like while most, I think, lawyers are trying to adapt to this new world and make it part of their practice moving forward, I also get the sense that there are some that are trying to get by while we're in COVID, but then hoping things go back to normal and we can go back to in person and do everything in person. I'm trying to really just make sure everyone understands that it looks like this is going to be around. And so like if you're not able to adapt to this new environment, I think it'll be trouble, and you won't be as effective for your clients. So I want to make sure we're not just getting through this, but really taking the opportunity to get better and to be able to save clients time and money, and ourselves time and money, like you were talking about, the drive time, all that stuff that we're just chalking up before is probably going to go away moving forward. And the judges seem to have adapted to it a lot, and in most cases, it seems like too.
I completely agree. I think, I think some of the judges might prefer it too. It's just, and others might not, but I do think it's just, like you said, I don't see it going away. And I can see it only helping, to be honest with you, from my perspective. Again, there's going to be cases where you want to be in person. And so I do see it as being a mixture of the two, but this is a new tool that I think can benefit everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to switch gears a little bit and get your thoughts on a few things. One is just in terms of advice for lawyers, advice for especially lawyers who have been out practicing just maybe for a few years. What is something that stands out as something that you learned when you were a new lawyer, a young lawyer, and that is still an important part of your practice today, something that you learned that has stuck with you all the years that you've been practicing? What stands out?
I think what stands out to me is don't use the youth as an excuse. You want to find ways to expedite your learning curve. And what I'm always thinking is, and now, I guess 14 years into it, are there ways that I can make myself better? And I think the thing that I learned early on is don't use the youth as an excuse. When I mentioned it earlier, but when I first started at this firm, we had like 9 attorneys. I was certainly by far the youngest. I was the only baby attorney, and there was, the next one up was a 5 or 6 year, and then it only went up after that. But that offered me a lot of opportunity because I had friends that were at bigger firms that may not have done a deposition. We talked about depositions. That may not have taken a deposition for, the first 5, 6 years of their legal career. And 2 months in or 3 months into me working at this firm, I was down in Austin taking a plaintiff's deposition on my own, a translated deposition. That's my first deposition ever. It's a matter of being able to jump in and trying to handle a case on your own to the extent you're allowed to do that within the confines of whatever, practice or firm you're at. But not using, youth as an excuse for stuff, stepping in and stepping up where you're asked to. And I think what even now is I never, I'm trying to never stop learning. I don't ever want to get to that point where I think I haven't and don't foresee getting to that point where I think I know everything. But I think people kind of, you can rest on your laurels or whatever you want to call it, and not try to have that drive for excellence. And I just think that, knowing you'll never achieve excellence, or at least most of us won't, get to that top tier of excellence, you can at least find ways to get better and always learn and improve. And I think that's what I learned early on that I've tried to carry on and tried to express to associates we're hiring or summer clerks or young attorneys in our firm and outside of it is have that willingness and drive for excellence to learn something new and to implement that in your practice.
Yeah, and I really liked the way you said that, expediting the learning process, because I do think that's, we talk a lot about how it's a practice and how you're always going to be learning and improving if you're doing it right. But that expediting the learning, especially on the front end and trying to really ramp up, I think is really, really a great way to say that. And we've had a couple of guests on in the past that talk about, really, in those associate years, if you can kind of, 20%, 40%, 60% on top of what another associate's doing in terms of hours and practice and learning and all of those things. Like at 5 years, you're a 7-year lawyer, or you can get to that point faster. And that's what makes me think of when you say expedite the learning process.
No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, you put it in, I never even thought about it from that perspective, by expediting that learning curve, or you, like you just mentioned, by making yourself a certain percent better each day, each week, each month, each year. You can, I never thought about it, becoming you're basically a 7-year at year 5. I mean, that if you look at it in those terms, it's very encouraging that you could, maybe make yourself that way. And I think, you can learn things from different, outside of the legal world. For instance, I mean, I've got into, it's funny that we're on a podcast, because I've got really into the last year or so in listening to a wide spectrum of podcasts. And I think the way that helps, they may not have anything to do with the legal world, but you can learn interviewing techniques, right? And what does interviewing techniques translate to me is a deposition. You can listen. I was reading an article about some of the best interviewers. I mean, I think, you see like Dave Letterman on Netflix. I think Letterman's a great interviewer. Charlie Rose, Howard Stern, they all have their different methods. And you think about that translating to depositions, everybody has a different, when I'm, teaching my witnesses, or instructing my witnesses, or preparing my witnesses, I tell them about these different, methods that attorneys use. Some of them are very friendly, some are very confrontational, but they can all try to get answers from you in their different methods. So you got to be ready and aware of those things. And so I think that can help a young attorney, again, outside the legal world. How does David Letterman ask questions, or how does Howard Stern or any of these people that you might listen to on whether it be podcast or interview on TV, investigative journalism, how does that translate over to the legal world? I think we could get a lot of good tips that we forget about the real world examples of investigative journalism, and how does that help us investigate a case and help our client. So I look outside the legal world a lot of times to see how I can improve myself. And I think that's a key for any young attorney, is to find those, ways you can help improve. And it may not be litigation. You may be a transactional, and I can't instruct you as much on that side, but these are the things I've kind of thought about for litigation.
I love that so much. And it is good to see like how interviewers, that are the best at what they do, are able to gain answers and gain trust from the interviewee, and get them to say things that they may not otherwise. And it's just it's a great idea, I think, to translate that then over into investigating a case, or even conducting an interview with a witness or anything like that. I think it makes total sense, and great idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's and like you just said with Howard Stern, he gets friendly with people, and then he asks them, question that's really prying into their personal life, and they answer it with no hesitation. I mean, and it's crazy. And Charlie Rose is very methodical, and he step by step gets to a question he wants to ask, and both of those methods are great, and you can use both of those methods depending on who you're talking to and who you're deposing, or on the witness stand in a trial. I think you can have takeaways from that, in addition to listening to your Mark Lanier's of the world, and seeing how they do a cross-examination, which I just one of the things I mentioned, constantly learning. I think in these COVID times, it's become so easy to log on almost every day, whether it be the Dallas Bar Association or some other organization, and do a CLE via Zoom. Yeah. And I just did one the other day with Shane Reed, who has written books on depositions and cross-examinations, and he heavily focuses on what Mark Lanier does. So you take these examples of Charlie Rose, Howard Stern, combine that with what does Mark Lanier do in a cross-examination or in a deposition, and man, it's just pick up those little tips from everywhere that you can, and try to see what works for you and what doesn't. We're not all the same, so you got to really feel out what works for you and what does not. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think the thing that is more unique now about being able to hear these longer form interviews in podcasts and things like that. When you're used to seeing little short hit, types of interviews on like a cable news show or something, where it's only like a 3-minute segment or a 2-minute segment, and they're just basically trying to get out sound bites. It is really, that's good to watch too, because the interviewers have a really hard job in that scenario to try to get them to actually get off their talking points and say something of actual value. But in a long form interview, like Howard's going to interview someone for an hour, or Charlie's going to interview someone for an hour, which is more like when you've got someone in a scenario that you're going to have time with them. You can actually see the formulation, the strategy of taking them out. And I think it's really, just really helpful. And then, the other piece to that is, we've talked a couple of times before on the show about the reading great writers to become a better writer. And I think similar things are true to what you were saying about listening to Mark Lanier, and some of them especially, is to continue to learn by just consuming who the best is at whatever it is that they're doing, and learn from that, and continue to learn from that. And then lastly, to your point about being able to log in and do webinars and CLEs remotely now, also being able to catch a hearing, which is now being streamed on YouTube, whereas before you'd had to physically been in the courtroom. And now some of these hearings and some of these trials that aren't on like court TV or something like that, but just these local trials are getting streamed out on a public YouTube stream or something else, or an internal link or something. And so there's a lot more that you can observe actually in a courtroom right now than you ever could before. And so I think there are tremendous opportunities to do all of that right now. It's just kind of exciting.
Absolutely. And I think, you hit the nail on the head. You learn from good and bad, right? You can log on to one of those and see what not to do. I always tell, when I'm doing interviews, for summer clerks, I always tell them, you can come to our firm and you might see some bad takeaways from things I do. Well, use that in your future practice. If you like the way, somebody does one thing and how somebody does another, and then you don't like how somebody, pick those things up, and again, figure out what works for you and what doesn't. Sometimes if you're working with a certain partner or senior associate, you've got to kind of take their instruction and do, something the way that they want it. But again, you can kind of learn good and bad. And by watching on YouTube a hearing, you can see a judge get onto an attorney, learn what not to do. And then you can hear a great attorney give a great, closing and see exactly what to do. And what you hit, earlier on the written advocacy, that's a big thing I always tell people too is, like you said, read good writers and that's again, outside of the legal world or within the legal world.
Right. Absolutely.
Read some opinions by some of the great justices, and pick up those writing tips. But that's one of the keys I tell folks is early on, we were talking about what you could do to stand out, and written advocacy as a young associate, focusing on getting better at written advocacy is key number one, because that, being able to have clearer and persuasive writing to express your ideas, to advance legal arguments, I think that only sets you up to be able to argue that later in front of the judge in a speaking capacity is having that good foundation of written advocacy first. And that's what you're going to be doing so much of early on, whether it's a memo for a partner or whether they ask you to draft that motion for summary judgment. If you can, have some great skills and improve your skills in written advocacy, you're going to stand out with all the other associates. Yeah.
Well, and that's a great way to transition, because I did want to ask you about that in terms of what what a young associate at a firm can do to stand out. You've mentioned writing and getting good at that. Is there an example or something that pops into your head in terms of when you've seen a young lawyer, first, second year associate, when you can just see right away or within those first couple of years, hey, this person's got it together. They're on their way. They're going to be great. You just kind of have that sense because of maybe something they've done or something they do, or just the way that they go about their business. What's something that young associates can do to stand out for you?
I mean, I think the first way is to actually stand out, to be a leader when someone, different firms handle things differently, but a lot of times here, we'll have kind of a firm-wide email. Can anybody help on this project? And you kind of see the same people that are eager to learn, eager to learn new things and improve, jumping on it first. So I think you stand out by being a leader in that sense, by, taking responsibility, and
volunteering
and
for projects.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Volunteering, being the first to volunteer, and knowing your balance, not taking on too much where you can't complete anything because you become overwhelmed, but wanting to learn new things outside of what may be comfortable. And if you do that, and then when you do it, you provide that good written example of work that's proofread a number of times before you ever give it to the partner. If you want to go to the flip side of what not to do is, you don't send me something, which I've had happen, that says, hey, this is just a draft. This is a rough draft. Here it is. And I tell people, no, when you are asked to do a project and you turn that over to senior associate or partner, whoever has asked you to do it, you have it in the form that in your own mind, you think it is a finished product. You think it is ready to be finished, finalized. Now, you may get feedback and you may have to change things, but by way of proofreading and by way of clearly expressing your own ideas, you have it in a form that you believe is the finalized product or could be.
Right.
Because so often, I've literally had people, give me stuff and say, well, hey, this is a rough draft. Well, why are you giving it to me? I asked you to do this project. Why are you giving me a rough draft? But, and some people may ask for rough drafts. I don't know. You got to listen to who you're working for. But to me, at the end of the day, you want to turn in a something that you believe is a finished product in your own mind. By way of proofreading for the most part, because you'd be amazed at how many times you read stuff and it's in no way, shape, or form proofread, or if it is, we've got some serious problems.
I think most that have brought the subject up on the show have said the same thing as you, is to turn it over as if it's ready to be signed and turned over and stamped and submitted. And so absolutely, I will confess that in the past, I know for a fact that I've not in a law firm practice setting or anything like that, but submitted something where I'm saying this is just a rough draft. And I think the only reason I said that is because in my mind, I thought it was just fine and great and could be turned over. It's more of a crutch of like, if someone comes back and like really hammers this thing, I can say, well, it was a rough draft. It's a rough draft.
That is true.
So it's more of just like a confidence like thing where it's like, I don't know if anyone else would feel that, but
I agree. And if you were, if we were working on a project together and we were going back and forth on it, that, I think that's perfectly fine. We can send drafts back and forth but if it's something, hey, I want you to do this memo, and I want the answer, tomorrow to send me, oh, well, this is a rough draft. That's a completely different. No. But I agree with you. I've done the same thing. That, we've all done that before. Yeah. But I think it goes back to what I said earlier about that drive for excellence. And finding ways to expedite that learning curve is if you are that person that has every time I've asked you to do a project, you turn in that thing it looks to me like a finalized product, and I have to make so few changes. It's amazing. That's the person that stands out. That's the person that advances, faster than the rest. Yeah.
Last quick subject here before we end our time, because we're running short. I do want to ask you about hiring. As I said earlier, most of our folks listening are in their first couple years of practice. When you look at and consider lateral hires, associate hires, what's something that you're looking at? Maybe it's on a resume, maybe it's in the interview. What are one or two things that you're looking at that kind of key you up to say, hey, this person might be a good fit here. This is someone we ought to talk to more or consider bringing on.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I was just reading an article recently about how, I guess, lacking traditional hiring is as far as being able to look at a resume and say, oh, this person is going to be good or not good. It was talking about how, resiliency and compassion are actually much more important than, grades or traditional classroom measures. And so I think it's very hard to get to the point. It's very hard to be able to look at a resume and be able to say, hey, this person might be great. I think you get some more from conversation, but it's still hard to tell. How do you tell a person's resilient? I think part of what you have to do is an interview. Tell me about a difficult situation you faced and how you overcame that. Because, I think that those two, resiliency and compassion for others, are much better predictors of how you're going to be a fit at our firm or at most firms. Than what your grade was in Civ Pro in year one. It's so hard. Right. So I don't know if that answers your question, but no. the methodology is how do we come up with better methodology to measure those things, to measure resiliency and compassion versus, again, top grade in Civ Pro. That person with top grade in Civ Pro might be that person with resiliency and compassion. I don't know. But right. I think the key today in lateral hiring and summer clerk hiring is how do we find new measures? Because otherwise, what this article talked about was your traditional method was really a flip of the coin. Will that person work out or will they not? A lot of times it's a flip of a coin, unless we find better ways to measure how or get to the bottom of who this person in front of us really is. And I don't know. I can't tell you the best way to do that.
Well, listen, I think the fact that you're even asking that question is a credit to you and your firm, because I do think that that's the way it's going to go eventually. And the legal profession traditionally moves slower than others in trying to adapt to things like this. But I think you're absolutely right. I'll use the word grit and substitute with resiliency for a second. There's a whole kind of movement and a book written a few years ago. Angela Duckworth wrote it, I believe, called Grit. And there was a TED Talk that was one of the top 10 TED Talks about the importance of grit and its indication of success in whatever field and whatever venue that a person enters into. And so I think you're right on with that. And I do think the harder part in some ways is to identify the methodology to discover those things through an interview process or through a evaluation of candidates and so forth. But that's really good stuff. Well, as I said, we're running short on time. But is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you wouldn't want to leave without saying to the lawyers in the audience? Any last bit of wisdom or advice?
Yeah, I think luckily in today's world, mental health and addictions becoming more talked about, and I can't stress enough for young associates to take time. We talk about work-life balance, we talk about those things, but take time to improve yourself, not only in the legal world, but something like meditation. It's amazing how it wasn't talked about when I was a young attorney, but things like meditation and all the talk now and all the articles written about in the legal profession, mental health and addiction. It's a big deal. I'll tell you this, I'm in recovery. I haven't, and I have been for the past few years, and I wish I would have learned earlier about the fact that especially within the legal profession, it's such a widespread issue, whether it be addiction or mental health issues. And if you don't talk about it, if you don't talk with others about it, if you don't seek help when you need it, and if you don't focus on improving yourself, not only not only in the legal world, but mentally, spiritually, and physically, I think that's something that we don't talk about enough. So if there's one thing that we haven't talked about that is a takeaway is make sure you focus on yourself at times and your loved ones and your family. Don't let your legal career take over all of your life. You're gonna have to spend a lot of time to improve there on the things we've talked about. But man, what if you're not focusing on staying sane and not falling into potential addiction problems, or getting help when you do, and that it can't be taboo. We've got to have places where people can reach out to. You've got things like LCL, Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers. I know we have a Dallas group. We have them across the state. So if you're ever looking for a place where you need to turn, something like that is very important to remember to focus on yourself and get better. Yeah.
Well, first of all, just thank you for sharing your personal story, and thank you for raising the issue here. It is very important. It is one that gets brought up here in this context on occasion, and I do think that we probably need to actually do entire episodes or series of episodes on the topic because it is that important to the health of everyone within our profession, and so I appreciate you, and congratulations on being in recovery, and just thank you for opening up and sharing that. I really appreciate it. And I know that there are people listening that maybe needing to hear that and have steps they need to take. And I hope that they will take this as a sign and as a call to make that call, or to tell that friend, or to go into one of those organizations you mentioned to do that. So thanks for that. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Absolutely.
And to close out here, our rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. Name the one trait or characteristic that you most want to see in an associate.
I'll go back to that resiliency.
Yeah, good.
Or grit. Grit. Every
no, yours is resiliency. What habit has been key to your success?
Learning, always learning. Try to be, on that improvement, again, expediting that learning curve. Always try to learn something new and continue learning.
That's right. That's awesome. Your favorite app or productivity tool?
Recently, 1Password. Password manager.
1Password.
Couldn't help me
password manager. Yeah. To keep all your passwords. Yeah.
The one I use is called 1Password. It's the numeral 1 and then password.
Numeral 1Password.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I've tried a couple of those and it's been kind of hit and miss. So I'm glad to know that there's another one.
I've just started using it in the last few months, and it couldn't help, but it couldn't help more. There's other productivity tools, but man, that's the one that jumps to mind first.
Passwords take up a large part of our day, I'm afraid. So that's helpful. Your favorite social distancing activity? What have you been up to the last few months?
I guess golf. It's outdoors and you can stay away from folks. So golf would probably be it. I'm trying to improve. I'm not I'm not very good, so just continuously trying to improve in that area too. Yeah. We did. I will say this: our firm did just on Tuesday win the Dallas Bar Association. I was part of a four-person team here, and our firm did win the DBA golf tournament on Tuesdays.
Oh, congrats! That's awesome.
I was definitely the worst golfer of the crew, but we did win. So.
All right. Well, I've started to try to pick up playing again. It's been like 15 years, and so I'll have to come up and play with you because we'll be at about the same level, I think. So
sounds good.
Lastly, your favorite legal movie?
I love To Kill a Mockingbird, but my favorite legal movie is My Cousin Vinny. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
You can pick up some good cross-examination techniques and other things. That's my favorite, My Cousin Vinny.
Oh, absolutely.
Plus, they talk about making grits. I'm from Georgia.
Yeah, the grits. Are you sure
I'm from Georgia, and I love grits. So that's one of my favorite parts of any movie, legal or otherwise, is the cross-examination involving the grits.
Regular. Instant grits?
No self-respecting Southerner uses instant grits. I take pride in my grits.
So, Mr. Tipton, how could it take you 5 minutes to cook your grits when it takes the entire grit-eating world 20 minutes?
I don't know. I'm a fast cook, I guess.
I'm sorry, I was all the way over here. I couldn't hear you. Did you say you're a fast cook? That's it? Are we to believe that boiling water soaks into a grit faster in your kitchen than on any place on the face of the earth?
I don't know.
Well, perhaps the laws of physics cease to exist on your stove. Were these magic grits? I mean, did you buy them from the same guy who sold Jack his beanstalk beans?
Objection, Your Honor.
Objection sustained.
Are you sure about that 5 minutes?
Ignore the question.
Are you sure about that 5 minutes?
I don't know.
I think you made your point.
Are you sure about that 5 minutes?
I may have been mistaken.
I got no more use for this guy.
It is so good. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. You don't have to. I mean, the whole movie's great, and you should watch it. And go back and listen to our podcast we did here, where we talked about My Cousin Vinny in depth. But go watch the movie. But go watch the scene, or even on YouTube, pull up the Grits Cross, and it's fantastic. So awesome. Well, Joey, thanks again so much for taking time to spend with us. We really appreciate it, and wish you all the best.
No problem. Thanks for the invitation, and wish the best to you as well.
All right, my thanks again to Joey Sampson for joining us on the show today. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider doing two things for me? One, would you subscribe so you don't miss an episode? And then two, would you rate and review the podcast in Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts? If you have suggestions or thoughts about the show, or I could help you in any way, please email me directly, daniel@varsitysearch.com. And I want to emphasize this one today. I know I say it most every week, but I am going into a few weeks here where we're really looking at how can we best tweak or change or add to the show in 2021 so that it better serves you and gives you more of what you need as you're developing as a lawyer, how to navigate law practice, how to think about making a lateral change, any of those things. So I really do want to hear your thoughts or things that you would want me to cover or different ways that you would want me to approach things. So this is a great time to do that. Again, so I'll make the plug, daniel@varsitysearch.com. Would love to hear from you. Please do that. Also, don't forget to check out the opportunities that we mentioned at the top of the show. I won't go back and repeat them now, but as I said, they're on LinkedIn. On my LinkedIn page, if you're not there, go ahead and connect with me so I know that you're out there, and you can see all the stuff that I post on a regular basis, including the highlights from these episodes. All right, that's it for today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Thanks again so much to each of you for listening. I'm Daniel here with Varsity Search, and we'll talk with you next time.